Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Sandy Smith, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Warrant Officer Class 1 Kim Owen. We warmly welcome the family of Corporal George Dudley Pepper, whose story will be told shortly. We also warmly welcome Mr. Dennis Baker, President of the 2nd 20th Battalion Association. As always, we welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by family and visitors to the memorial. If you are able, I now invite you to please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. Visitors who are able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of over 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Corporal George Dudley Pepper. George Pepper was born on the 28th of October 1914 in the Sydney suburb of Paddington, the son of George and Ida Pepper. His younger brother Albert had been born the year before, and his sister Mavis was born in 1919. George was a New South Wales and National Australian swimming champion and had many trophies to prove it. Described in 1931 as East Sydney's latest water marvel. He was also a lifesaver at Narrabeen and North Bondi beaches. George's mother Ida died when he was 9 years old. Raising the three children fell upon George Sr., a sheet metal worker. Eventually, young George gained employment as a labourer and storeman. At the time of the Second World War, he was single and living in Randwick. George Pepper enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force in Sydney on the 26th of June 1940. His brother Albert joined the RAAF a few months later. George was allotted to the 2nd 20th Infantry Battalion in July, and towards the end of the year moved from Sydney to Bathurst for training. In early February 1941, Private George Pepper embarked with his unit in Sydney aboard the converted cruise liner Queen Mary, bound for Malaya. A fortnight later, he disembarked at Singapore. During the sea journey, George was appointed acting corporal. In Malaya, he was granted 2 periods of special leave in Singapore, one in March and one at the end of April, despite being reprimanded and disciplined for poor conduct twice. This special leave to Singapore was likely granted in order for him to complete in swimming meets, in which Pepper continued to accumulate trophies. He lost one race, however, to a young Chinese swimmer named Ki Soon Bee. Pepper remembered he had taught Soon Bee the backstroke turn he had learnt from the Japanese champion Masagai Kiyakawa. At the end of August, as the threat of war with Japan loomed, the 2nd 20th redeployed to Mersing on Malaya's east coast. Japan attacked in Asia and the Pacific on the 7th and 8th of December 1941, including landings on mainland Malaya, but the 2nd 20th would not see action for a month. After some clashes with the enemy during January 1942, the battalion was withdrawn from Mersing to Singapore. There it took up a position on the island's west coast. When the Japanese stormed Singapore Island on the 9th of 8th February, the widely dispersed 2nd 20th was soon forced back. Despite confused fighting, most were able to withdraw in good order to form a new defensive perimeter. But before long, the Australians were overwhelmed and forced to retreat in scattered parties into the city. Singapore fell on the 15th of February. The Allied troops were initially imprisoned in the sprawling Changi prisoner of war camp. But at the end of March 1943, Pepper was among 1,000 prisoners of war who formed E-Force. This group departed Singapore bound for Borneo and hard labour. After a brief stay on Bahala Island, the prisoners were sent to Sandakan on the mainland, where they joined British and Australian prisoners who had arrived a year earlier and were building an airstrip for the Japanese. At first, conditions and food supplies were reasonable, but from mid-1943, conditions at Sandakan deteriorated. Treatment of the remaining prisoners worsened in 1944, with brutal beatings, torture, and dwindling food supplies. By early 1945, the Japanese feared an Allied invasion of Borneo. In response, they began moving the prisoners away from the coast, overland to Ranau, a small village some 250 kilometres to the west. The first group of 455 prisoners left in groups of 50, beginning on the 28th of January. Among this group was Corporal George Pepper. The men were already weak from beriberi and malnutrition, and most lacked boots. Those who fell by the wayside were executed along the way. Barely a quarter made it to Renown, including George Pepper. Yet this once fit, strong athlete could not withstand the ravages of malnutrition, overexertion and disease. He died of beriberi at Renown No. 1 camp on the 10th of March 1945 and was buried in a nearby makeshift cemetery. He was 30 years old. Further death marches took place in May and June, while the weak and ill were left behind without accommodation, food or medical care. All told, some 2,428 British and Australian prisoners of war died at Sandakan or on the death marches to Renown. Only 6 Australians survived. Like most, George Pepper's remains were never recovered after the war. Today, he is commemorated on the Laban Memorial, which names more than 2,000 Australians who died while prisoner of war in Borneo and the Philippines, and who have no known grave. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, amongst almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Corporal George Dudley Pepper, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of our director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.